It's nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having us.
So I want to talk about a couple of things, but I want to start out with an experiential question, because you just played a pretty big gig opening for Arkells at the Bud Stage in Toronto. If you're listening to this and you don't know what the Bud Stage is, it used to be called the Molson Canadian Amphitheatre, and I think if it's probably the biggest venue in Toronto right now to hear a band. So about 18,000 people, and you guys start out playing club shows to how many? 10, 20 people at the beginning?
Sometimes less.
Like have you ever done the play,
2?
Have you done the play for the bar staff?
Yes, for sure.
Of course, yeah. In Minneapolis was the best time. Leah took a fan, and she put it out on the dance floor, and we played to
Our one fan.
You're one fan,
but like a blowing fan, not
a human.
Not a human fan.
So Peter, tell me this: you look out on stage, and there has to be a moment within the 45 minutes, hour that you played, that you have some kind of realization that this is pretty big. What was that moment? What did you feel?
Oh man, I think it was likely having to do with playing with Arkells. Realistically, like I think that we've had opportunities to play really big opening slots, and some of which with bands that we really like. Mm-hmm. But to do it with a band that has been our friends for 4 or 5 years, they took us on our first tour across Canada, and I think that I've been talking about it a lot lately about how you look back on certain scenes for your heroes, let's say Broken Social Scene or, Yorkville in the late 60s or whatever, and you think of this as this really community-driven thing where everyone was working together and they were all friends and stuff.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes because you're on the road all the time as a musician, you don't feel that. You feel like you're like on an island and you're kind of all on your own. And you kind of are yearning and wanting that kind of community. So I think standing on the Bud Stage, looking at it, that insane crowd, I think everybody in the crowd knew that Arkells and us were really close buds. And to have a show that was friends, it felt like every person there could sense like the community that I guess that I had always really wanted. Because I look back on Attacking Black and Cons or whatever it is, like throughout Canadian, like awesome rock and roll. There's always these like pairings, and it was cool to just play with a band that we respect and we consider our closest friends.
What's funny about that is that you're right. I mean, to us, it seems like there's a community of musicians, but you guys are on the road enough that you only probably see each other once or twice a year. Leah, what do you do as a performer when you go from playing even a couple of hundred people or a couple of thousand people to 18,000? Does that change your performance at all? How do you deal with that?
Well, the thing that I love about performing is just the communal feeling of having a bunch of humans in a space together.
Right.
And so for me, it doesn't really matter if there's like 2 people or, a couple thousand people.
No extra nerves?
However many people. I think I'm nervous no matter what. I think for smaller audiences, it can be sometimes even more, I don't know, that I can get more nervous for that because it's just kind of like every move you make seems amplified, or you feel like you're under a microscope even more or something like that. But yeah, I think our approach as a band has always just been give it your all. I mean, when we did play that Minneapolis show to 2 people, we kind of had the decision of, do we play this show? Do we play it full out, or do we do what the bar owner and promoter kind of said, which was just like, listen, I'm still going to pay your guarantee. No one's here. You don't have to play. And we were just like, well, we came all this way, and we traveled to get here, and we have the opportunity. Like, we do have the next, hour and 15 minutes to play all our songs to the best of our ability. And that was kind of, I think, the moment where it became part of our mandate and our manifesto, that it's just like, no matter who's in the room, as long as someone's in the room, they deserve the same show from us and the same amount of devotion to our craft and passion for what we do, whether it's one person or, 18,000 people.
Is that the key? Like, the Tragically Hip have a story about playing in, I think it was upstate New York, and they were already doing very, very well here. And they went down there, and they played for 3 people, and someone said, you don't really have to do this if you don't want. And they said, no, those 3 people are going to get the best Tragically Hip show they've ever seen in their entire lives. But there are musicians who we all know who maybe wouldn't do that, maybe would kind of phone it in, maybe go out and sing a couple of songs, apologize, or just kind of being too embarrassed. Like Peter, is that the secret? Not that there is a secret, but does that help? If you're that ideology, that's hard to establish as a band altogether, because as a band altogether, you all have different ideas of what you want to do and different ideas of what success means and different ideas of what ego does. But does having that collective desire to play no matter what, is that responsible for some of your success?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on we knew that even when we were playing in the so-called smaller shows where maybe their people hadn't shown up or whatever, you see a lot of bands on tour that are sort of laughing on stage and calling it in a little bit. And watching that is so depressing. And so I think that it probably derives a lot, like you said, from like sort of an ideology of our heroes. I think that there's like a lot of historical precedent for bands like The Hip or Constantines.
And the Constantines are a great example
Constantines
of that.
played anywhere with a wall plug.
Yeah.
That was their rule, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, you know, those often those shows end up being really transformative for the band. I know that Minneapolis show, for instance, that bartender ended up loving the show, and we got an opening slot at the bar a little later on. And
he joined Kings of Leon.
he joined Kings
and then
No, but it is. It's like there's an ideology there that I think that in general you are constantly really you try to like stick to your guns, and sometimes it's hard to remember what your guns are through, as you know. I mean, I'm sure over your career things change and things are always kind of shifting.
Oh.
And no, but it's hard to
Yeah,
remember
you're right,
why
yeah.
you're doing it, and especially when you're beat tired and you've done 100 shows in a row or whatever. But when you do make those kind of rules where no matter what the show is, you give every human being in that audience a hell of a show, then it all of a sudden you know why you're doing it, and you feel closer together, and you feel like there's a reason for it all, and that it's still, even if the chance is small, there's still a chance that you can change the world, you know?
And it allows you to play for 18,000 people if the same as 3 people, because in your minds there's really no difference, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and it's also like a difference, or that the point that there's no difference between you just because you traveled there and you get to stand on a stage. Like there's no difference between you as a human being and the people who, you know, drove 3 hours to see you or walked 3 blocks to see you. It's just like, it's about, you know, humans as equal beings with their same stories, and if we can find ourselves in the same space, even if you came alone and there's only 2 other people in the room, it's like we have that in common, and they're respecting us by being there, and why wouldn't you just show them the exact same amount of respect?
Speaking of respect and speaking of ideology in shows, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the literature and the posters that you put up before your shows, which I think are really beautiful. And some of my favorite moments are when I look on Instagram and it's not even you guys putting them up; it's people taking pictures of your posters at your shows and putting them up before they go to see a July Talk show. And if you're listening to this, I want to let you know just a little quote of what it says on these posters that you see, if I'm not mistaken, on your way in, on like the doors on the way in.
They're in the
Everywhere,
bathrooms too.
It says, just a quote, "Love lives here. It's important for us that our shows are safe for everybody, regardless of the color of your beautiful skin, what you believe in, where you come from, how you got here, how you love, how you choose to identify yourself, and how your exquisite body moves through space. We welcome you." And it goes on after that. Leah, that's obviously a really beautiful gesture. Where did the idea come to put these notices up?
I think that our job as people who have been given a platform and who have been given this beautiful, amazing life to be able to tour around and make art for a living, part of our responsibility is to inspire people to speak up and speak out and allow themselves to shine because they deserve to. When I think about going to shows as a teenager, what the difference would have been if the 4 guys who are standing on stage, it was usually, 4 guys standing on stage.
4 men.
being in a band. Yeah, the difference between if they had made me feel welcome there as a young teen girl, to make me feel like to make me feel like I was valued, to make me feel like my safety was valued, to make me feel like I was being respected as a human being. I never saw myself joining a band or doing what we're doing now, but I feel like, that potentially that vision or that dream would have been clearer to me, and if I felt welcome. in that space, if you want people to feel welcome and able to allow their light to shine on a stage for other people to see, for their love to be shared, for their ideologies to be shared, you need to create a welcoming space for all human beings, not only within the industry and on the stage, and show them that they can do that, but they also first and foremost have to feel safe being at a show and feel welcome being at a show.
What is it about concerts that you think sometimes brings out the darkest parts of us, the darkest parts of humans? I mean, you have stories of rapes at shows, of people being crowd surfing and being groped. I mean, terrible, abusive, deplorable behavior at expressions of art. Really, what is it about when the lights go down and the band comes up that sometimes the worst of us comes out?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know alcohol has something to do with it, probably. Music as a power and as a superpower. Anytime there's power and the depths of our souls being touched, I guess within the depths of certain people's souls, there's something different than the need to come to a space and enjoy and gather and feel community and feel safe. For some people, there's something else, and there's an opportunity to take advantage or
of the darkness of the anonymity.
Potentially. I mean, I've been a victim of that at concerts and as a audience member at festivals, being like grabbed and groped and awful things, and I think that's kind of why it's particularly so important to me that doesn't happen. The idea is just that, if we can't take care of each other in the places where we come to gather and enjoy the power of music and the power of love, we are completely effed everywhere else.
I appreciate you saying effed.
No problem.
Peter, what's the reaction been from your audience to these?
It's been like relatively palpable. Like I really think there was a change in tone.
Really, from your perspective, just being on stage.
For sure.
What did you notice?
Well, I mean, we used to, you go to a rock and roll show and you're really building on a pretty like patriarchal system, obviously. But in the past, we had fights at the shows. We've had like, two people screaming at each other because they couldn't get the right spot to watch from. That happens quite often when people drink a lot.
Yeah.
And Leah's really good at diffusing that and walking off stage and kind of getting in between them. But I think that once those signs are up in the bathroom and there's just sort of this vibe in the room of like, oh wow, they're really like kind of dictating that this is now a different kind of space for the night. I mean, I think that to look further into why these things kind of happen, and they happen all the time. I mean, shows aren't safe spaces for the most part. It's a large group of people, and I think that the like you say, the dark sides of people come out when there's absolutely no consequences, and yeah, I just think that I don't want to send this conversation in this direction, but obviously there was a pretty complicated time down south with the election results, and that was when we were touring the States, which was also like kind of, I think, contributed to like.
Did you feel that?
Us putting those signs up, because I really love like the history of punk rock in the States, and I think that at times of pretty much pure evil, sometimes rock and roll can be a real rock and roll shows can be a place of a sanctuary, and so having the signs up just felt so awesome in like an Ian MacKaye kind of like really cool way, and also to see, we toured through Europe and went to, Leah had it translated into like 13 languages, like, and just from meeting people at shows and being like, do you mind? So it was just a cool like thing to be a part of. And I think that in general, like you said, people take photos of it. It doesn't just exist within the space that we're playing. It exists online, which, is a real, we hope that kind of transports the message to other bands and allows them to try to like create safe spaces for their fans as well.
And it makes us think, as audience members, it makes us think about why we're there in the first place. It makes us think about that. And I think, that, of course, we talk a lot about the idea of privilege and the idea of having blinders on. And I think that people like me, you know, big, tall, burly fellas don't see the danger of other people necessarily all the time. And by having these posters up, it reminds you of these things. And I'm starting to see them more in washrooms all across Toronto, and I'm seeing them all around the country. I'm going to ask a hard question here, but I did want to talk about this in the same topic. It is tremendous music you've made, but it is also quite remarkable how your band has changed a lot of the dialogue around the way people react at shows and the way people act at shows. And one of those instances was, Leah, when someone heckled you at a show in down south. Where was it again? It was in
Buffalo.
In Buffalo, so not too far from here. We're taping this in Toronto. And someone, I'm trying to figure out how I can do this on the radio, but someone called out something rather vulgar to you, saying essentially like if you could flash them, you know. And you responded in a really interesting way, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. You said, you wrote a response the next day and put it up online, and it was all over Facebook, and it said, "I love you because you were brought up in an effed up society under broken systems that have taught you this kind of behavior is okay. If I hate you, these norms I hate will never change." Tell me about that moment and why you responded the way you did.
I think what's the most important thing to note is that in that moment where it happened, it was like, there's videos of it online, you can watch it, but like me and Pete were in the middle of like a really quiet, you know, close together interaction. The band was quiet, allowing for this like beautiful space and this beautiful moment. And it was a cathartic moment. It was one of the last shows we played in 2016, and we'd been on the road since September with no breaks, and all had gone through so much together. And it was just like this really vulnerable moment. And to have someone take up that space, mindlessly call out what he was trying to do was take away my power and take away my position of
Platform.
Take away my platform, take away my voice, silence me. And I was really tired and like on the verge of a burnout just because of the circumstances. I was also, I think, on the first day of my period, and it was just like what came out of me was, who the F said that? Mm-hmm. And I didn't think about it. Like it was just, I just couldn't believe it. Like I was just in shock, and it was my first reaction was just like, how dare you? And do you have any idea what this band means and stands for? And the reason why I was able to have empathy and write that afterwards, like lying in bed 2 hours later, was because I felt completely supported by the space, which I wasn't expecting. That came out of my mouth. Peter immediately supported me. The band immediately supported me by allowing for the space of, turn the lights on. Let's find who that is. Get that person out of here. You're not welcome here anymore because you've completely overstepped a certain boundary, and you can't be here. The whole crowd was pointing him out. And you know, and he tried to like, he just, yeah, I don't know. It was just like, I was obviously so supported by the people around me and by the space.
And yeah, he tried to fight back in some ways.
He tried to blame it on someone else, and then he tried to fight a security guard on the way out.
In that, I mean, what an idiot. In the message, but even I feel that way, and I find that interesting. Is that when I saw it, the one thing I wanted to share was, you know, like I'll say it, F this guy, like. And I think a lot of the response from musicians and a lot of the response from your fans was F this guy and what an idiot. But I was just so shocked that you came to it out of a place of love, using the word love in your message rather than out of hate or anger.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the body reaction is F you, I hate you. But the reality of the matter is that if I could sit down with that person face to face over brunch the next day and explain to him why what he did was so weighted and heavy and terrible, and why it's contributing to a system that is keeping, you know, the world unsafe and the music industry unsafe and shows unsafe, I think that he would probably understand. I think most people, when you level with them as human beings, understand. And so rather than just hating and trying to, you know, humiliate that person in that action, yeah, because I had the support of a room full of people and the whole band, it kind of made it clear that was, I don't know, I was able to do that.
And it was clear where the power really was
I guess so.
in that moment.
Well,
Oh,
I feel like it
everyone in
was,
that room
yeah,
except
I feel
that
like it
guy.
was,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it was love.
Are you? It's been a pleasure. I could talk to you for a long time. Are you facing that right now? I mean, you mentioned that you were touring an album cycle at that point, Leah, and you were getting kind of burnt out. You guys have been on the road for a while. I was just talking to your manager there, Alex, and he was saying you guys have been on the road for a while. But are you gonna make another record? How are you feeling? Are your creative juices? It's funny to talk.
The end of last year was we like overdid it. It was to the point where we were. I think we would have walked into a clinic. We would have been announced clinically insane.
Yeah.
It just was totally overbooked. But I think we were able to sort of rejig this spring and try to really kind of do it right. And now Portland on Saturday is our last show of the summer. We're just writing, man. Like, it's so much fun to write a third record. It's so much more fun to write a third record than a second record.
But it's still fun. It's still fun.
Oh, hell yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, hell yeah, it's okay.
Heck
Hell yeah,
yes.
hell yeah, heck yeah.
We've been throwing around F's all over. But no, it's like the most liberated time I've ever had the pleasure to pick up a guitar. You know, with the second record, we were just so terrified. It's so funny standing in this room because we came and did a CBC First Music Play live. Sorry, that's not the branding.
Whatever it is. CBC, oh my God. CBC Music First Play Live.
There it is.
Didn't hear that in my headphones at all.
We were terrified. We didn't. It was so soon to us putting it out. And second records, man, it's like the cliches are all true. And there was the entire weight of the world on our shoulders. And now I just feel like so different and like so much lighter, you know? And so I'm excited.
It's a well, you had no sophomore slump. It's a really beautiful record, and I'm so happy more and more people are coming to see you.
Thanks, man.
And I'll be bummed when I can't go to George Street and see you there. I'll have to, helicopter in somewhere.
We are going to Newfoundland. We just announced today. We're going on September 21st.
I heard you're going into the big tent.
Come on down.
I think I might.
Please come down.
I think
That'd
I will.
be amazing.
Guys, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for chatting
it's so
with
good
us,
to see you.
Tom
Thanks a
Power.
million for
Pleasure
having
to see
us.
you.